Picture this. A young woman walks out under the lights at Sobeys Stadium in Toronto, and she is carrying something most professional athletes never have to carry into a single tennis match. She is carrying 4 matches in 6 days, 2 cities, 1 brutal title run, and a body that should by every reasonable measure be begging for a rest day. Instead, she is stepping onto center court against a player who, 48 hours earlier, had just taken apart the reigning Wimbledon champion in one of the wildest comebacks anyone had seen all season. This is the story of how Alex walked into that kind of ambush and walked out still undefeated in 7 straight matches. And honestly, by the time you get to the end of this, you are going to understand why so many people think this is the moment her career actually changed shape. Let's rewind for a second, though, because you cannot appreciate what happened on that Friday night without understanding what she had already survived just to get there. 6 days before that match, Alex was in Washington, D.C., grinding through one of the toughest draws you will ever see handed to a player at a 500-level event. Her first opponent was an Olympic gold medalist. She dropped the first set and somehow found a way to come back and win in 3. Next up was the defending champion of the tournament, and Alex dispatched her in straight sets like it was nothing. Then she ran into a 4-time Grand Slam semifinalist and beat her, too. By the time she reached the semifinal, she was up against Naomi Osaka, one of the biggest names in the sport, and she handled her in 2 clean sets. And then the final. The final is really where this whole story starts to make sense, because she was down against the tournament's 3-time champion, a top seed, trailing by a set and a break, staring down the barrel of a loss in the biggest match of her career. And then something clicked. She won the last 9 games of that match, 9 straight games to close out a title, including a 3rd set, where she basically dared her opponent to win a single point. That run made her the first player from the Philippines to ever win a singles title on the WTA Tour. It pushed her into the top 20 in the world for the very first time. It gave her 7 wins over top 10 opponents this season alone, tied for the most of anyone on tour. Now, here is the thing nobody talks about enough. Winning a title like that does not just test your game. It drains you, physically, mentally, emotionally. It takes something out of you that does not come back in a day or 2. And instead of getting a week to recover and celebrate, Alex got on a plane the very next day and flew straight to Toronto for a 1,000-level event with a stacked 96-player draw. She had a first-round bye as a seeded player, which bought her a little breathing room, but her very first match back was against an opponent who had actually beaten her before. Back in January at the Australian Open, in a match where Alex raced out to a 6-love first set, and then completely fell apart. This time was different, at least at first. She rolled through the first set 6-1. But then, in the second set, her level dipped hard. Her opponent saved 4 break points in a single game. And for a stretch there, Alex looked human, looked tired, looked like someone who had spent the last week emptying the tank in Washington. She found her footing again, took the 3rd set 6-2 with 3 service breaks, and the win extended her streak to 6 matches. But if you were watching closely, that match was a warning sign. Against a better player, that kind of dip could have ended everything right there. Which brings us to the real headline of this story, the matchup against Caty McNally. And let's talk about McNally for a second, because she deserves way more shine than she usually gets. She is from Ohio, coached by her own mother, and for years, she has been known primarily as a doubles specialist. Half of one of the more successful doubles pairings on tour alongside Coco Gauff. 9 WTA doubles titles, 2 U.S. Open doubles finals. As a junior, she won a French Open doubles title and a U.S. Open girls doubles title. But singles has always been the harder climb for her. She had never won a tour-level singles title in her career. Her career high-ranking world number 50 only came in June of this year, And that climb included elbow surgery that wiped out almost her entire 2024 season. Think about that for a second. She had to claw her way back, starting at a $40,000 event in Tampa, playing in front of maybe 40 people, just to remind herself and everyone else that she still belonged on a tennis court. And then 2026 happened, and something shifted. She made the fourth round in Madrid, the deepest run of her career at that level, and along the way she beat a top 10 seed for the first time in her life. She made the second round at the French Open for the first time. She picked up another title at a smaller tour-level event during the grass season. And then in Toronto, she produced what might be the single greatest win of her career, taking down the newly crowned Wimbledon champion in a match that will be talked about for a while. She was down 5-1 in the first set. Down! Against the best player in the world at that exact moment. And she clawed all the way back, saved 2 set points, stole the tiebreak, and then absolutely steamrolled the second set, winning 12 of the final 14 games of the match. That is not luck. That is a player whose game, built around a big serve and a comfort level at the net that comes from years of doubles experience, finally clicking into place on a surface that rewards exactly what she does well. So when she walked out to face Alex, she was not some overwhelmed underdog just happy to be there. She was riding real, earned confidence, the kind you cannot fake, the kind that comes from beating one of the best players alive 2 days earlier. And here is what made this matchup so fascinating from a storytelling perspective. These two had never played each other. Ever. No history, no head-to-head data, no patterns either player could lean on. It was a completely blank canvas, and for Alex specifically, that is a dangerous place to be, because so much of what makes her so good is her ability to read patterns and exploit them. Against a total unknown, she had to solve a brand-new puzzle in real time, all while carrying the accumulated fatigue of the most demanding stretch of her season. The first set gave everyone an early answer. Alex controlled it comfortably. 6-3, and the way she did it tells you everything about what has made her so dangerous this year. She broke serve in the fourth game by doing what she does better than almost anyone else on tour right now. She stood in tight on the baseline, took McNally's serve early, redirected the ball with angles that pulled her opponent way outside the court, and then made her pay the second any ball came back short. That return game is not just a skill for Alex, it is basically her identity as a player. It is the exact weapon that dismantled the tournament favorite in Washington. It is the same weapon that made a former French Open finalist look uncomfortable during a tight 3-set battle at Wimbledon earlier this year. Most players think of the return as a defensive shot, something you use to survive a point and get back into it. Alex does not play it that way. She turns the return into the first strike. She takes an opponent's biggest weapon and flips it into her own opening statement. Against McNally, whose entire game plan depends on using her first serve to set up quick, aggressive points, this was murder. Alex neutralized the serve, dragged the rallies into extended baseline exchanges, and McNally simply could not find rhythm. She broke again in the 6th game, served it out, and the whole thing took about 35 minutes. If you were just tuning in, you would have assumed this was heading toward a routine straight sets win. You would have been wrong. What happened in the second set is honestly the more important part of this entire story, because this is where we actually learn something about both players. McNally adjusted, and she adjusted well. This is a skill that has clearly grown in her over the last couple of years, and it is directly tied to everything she went through during her comeback from that elbow surgery. When you spend months rebuilding, going from a hospital recovery to practice courts, to tiny events most fans have never heard of, you learn patience under pressure in a way that shortcuts simply cannot teach you. She started landing. She started landing. More first serves. She got more aggressive coming forward, refusing to let Alex settle into the rhythm that had dominated the first set. Her net game sharpened by years of doubles at the highest level, gave Alex a completely different look than anything she had seen 20 minutes earlier. The set went on serve for 9 straight games. Neither player faced a real breakpoint chance through the middle stretch. The rallies stretched longer. The tension in the building climbed with every point. And you could feel the crowd, packed with Filipino fans who had turned this into something close to a home match for Alex, sensing that their player was suddenly in a real fight. McNally broke in the 10th game to steal the set 7-5. And just like that, the match was somewhere Alex had actually been before. More than once, recently. She had been there against the Olympic champion in Washington, down a set and needing to find another gear. She had been there just 2 days earlier against her Wednesday opponent, watching a dominant first set slip away in the second. Here is where it gets interesting if you have followed her season closely. Back in January, at the Australian Open, this exact kind of situation broke her. She took the first set 6-love and then completely collapsed, lost the match, and it became one of those results that lingers in a player's head. There was also a brutal straight sets loss to the newly minted Wimbledon champion back at Indian Wells earlier in the year, a first-round exit in French Open qualifying, another straight sets defeat at a smaller event against a rising young player. The old version of Alex, the one from earlier this season, tended to tighten up in these exact moments. She would start pressing, trying to force winners, instead of trusting the game plan that got her the lead in the first place. But this version of Alex, the one standing on center court in Toronto in August, has clearly learned something from all of that accumulated failure. The lesson was not to change what she does. The lesson was to do it with more discipline, more patience, and less panic. In the third set, she broke early to jump ahead 2-love. McNally answered immediately, breaking right back to level things at 2-all. The exact kind of gut-punch response that had defined her entire tournament. The same fighting spirit that let her erase a 5-1 deficit against the world's best player just 2 days before. For a few minutes, the match genuinely hung in the balance. The noise in the building kept climbing. Filipino flags, which had become a signature sight throughout Alex's entire week in Toronto, filled the stands, mixing with pockets of American fans cheering just as loudly for McNally. And then Alex did something that will not show up on a highlight reel. Something subtle but absolutely decisive. She started hitting her ground strokes a few feet deeper, consistently pushing McNally back behind the baseline. Think about why that matters so much for a player like McNally. She is tall, close to 6 feet, and her whole aggressive identity depends on getting inside the court to execute her net game and her approach shots. Push her back a few feet, and you take away the exact real estate she needs to be dangerous. Alex did that over and over, and it slowly strangled McNally's ability to dictate anything. The 5th game of that third set turned out to be the game that decided the entire match. Alex won it on the back of a sequence of returns that landed just inside the service line. Untouchable, including a pair of backhand returns down the line that McNally could only watch sail past her. From 3 games to 2, Alex held to make it 4-2, then broke again to push it to 5-2, and stepped up to serve for the match. McNally, credit to her, was not going quietly. She broke back immediately, dragging the match to 5-3 and forcing Alex to serve it out one more time. Alex held firm in that final game and closed it out, 6-4 in the third, wrapping up a match that lasted almost exactly 2 hours. And when the two players met at the net, you could see it in both of their faces, the kind of mutual respect that only comes from a match where both competitors genuinely left everything they had out on that court. Now, here is why this result matters so much more than a simple box score. This was Alex's 7th straight win, tying her longest winning streak of the entire season. It punched her into the round of 16 at a 1,000-level event for the 4th time this year. She had just beaten a player who was riding the absolute peak of her career, someone who had toppled a Wimbledon champion with a level of confidence that comes maybe once in an athlete's career. And she did it all while managing a level of physical fatigue that would have wrecked most players on tour. Think about her schedule for a second. A tournament final on Sunday, a flight to a new country on Monday, a three-set battle on Wednesday, and then this, a three-set war on Friday. 4 matches in 6 days, spread across 2 tournaments and 2 different cities, coming right on the heels of a week that required 5 wins just to lift a trophy. That is not a schedule. That is an endurance test most athletes would not even attempt. For McNally, the loss obviously stings, but let's be real about what this week actually represented for her. Beating a Wimbledon champion was only the second top 10 win of her entire career. Her run through this draw, including a 3-set win in the opening round and then the demolition of that 6th seed, showed everyone watching that her singles game is finally starting to catch up to the doubles resume that has defined her career up to this point. She is 24 years old. She has already fought through a serious injury and come back stronger. She is going to get more chances like this one. And honestly, given the trajectory she is on, you should probably expect to see her name a lot more in the coming months. But this week, without question, belonged to Alex. And there is a piece of this story that goes beyond tennis entirely, something worth sitting with for a second. The Filipino fans who packed that stadium in Toronto turned the building into something close to a home court advantage for her, thousands of miles away from where she actually calls home. It got so intense that tournament organizers actually moved her second-round match to the main stadium because ticket demand for her matches broke records. After her Wednesday win, Alex switched from English to Filipino mid-interview just to speak directly to that community, telling them how proud she was to represent them, how she saw them show up every single week, how their presence made a foreign city feel like home. And that connection is not just a nice side story. It is functionally part of her support system. She does not have a massive National Tennis Federation bankrolling her development. She does not come from a country with a long track record of producing WTA champions. She trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca and built her entire career from scratch, earning every single opportunity the hard way. That crowd noise, those flags, that chanting, that is the closest thing she has to the kind of institutional backing that players from bigger tennis nations get to take for granted. And what is remarkable is how she uses that energy. She feeds off it without ever letting it overwhelm her, which honestly is its own kind of mental skill that does not get talked about nearly enough. Zoom out for a second and look at her whole season so far. This Toronto run is basically a continuation of everything she showed off in Washington just days earlier. Her return game remains the single defining trait of her entire game. And what this week proved is that it works against basically any style you throw at it. Big power servers, tactical crafty servers, precision placement servers, and now a tall aggressive net rusher with a doubles.